the simple goal that I had when I started the principle was, can I create something that sounds better than a plugged-in piezo pickup on an electric acoustic?
You know something that always sounds terrible? Direct acoustic guitars. That piezo pickup going direct into a DI box and then into your live rig or into your interface. It never really sounds good, and it really doesn't sound like what your acoustic guitar sounds like. Well, what if there was something better out there? That idea is what inspired Stuart Bradbury from Neutron Studios to make the Quantum Acoustic Profile Pack. So you can load up one of these profiles into the Neuro amp modeler and make your electric guitar sound like an acoustic guitar. But does it sound like an acoustic guitar? Is it supposed to replace an acoustic guitar? And how do you even make a profile out of an acoustic guitar? So I jumped on a call with Stu to ask him all of my questions about the Quantum Acoustic Profile Packs for the Neuro amp modeler from Neutron Studios. All right, so can you just tell us all, what are the Quantum Acoustic Packs and why did you make them?
Right, yeah, a highly experimental process. In the end, we were teetering about releasing them or not because it's so difficult, again, to convince people that it's something they even really need to look at. We had some visceral responses to the idea of it, let alone the sound or anything, right? But to me, the idea was basically knowing what about modeling acoustic responses, and we developed some actual physical devices for this that are part of Quantum Speaker as well. It's a tie-in, I'll tell you about that later. But we have devices that can capture resonant behavior, that you can take something like an acoustic guitar and the soundboard, capturing the resonance. So what the idea of that experiment was to break the acoustic down, capture them separately, and then recombine those and try to turn that into an amp. The difficulty, if you like, with that process is it's dependent on the instrument that you create it with. So we had to come up with a way to solve that, which is why the included IR files that are in the pack, they're designed to match what you're playing. So those are sort of hyper important. Profiles are all created using a neck pickup, and originally the idea was to use humbuckers only, but then we decided we could try and get something going with single cores. So there are match IR files for single cores as well, but I think the best results are with a humbucker, and that's also much lower noise as well if you use a humbucker for the input. But the simple principle of it is you get your guitar, you load up the profile, you put it on the neck humbucker ideally, or single coil if you have to, and you load the impulse response that is closest to the humbucker you have, and then that will bring you back sonically to the place that the profile was created at, and it should sound the way that it was designed. So the simple goal that I had when I started the principle was, can I create something that sounds better than a plugged-in piezo pickup on an electric acoustic? So I wasn't trying to kind of replace acoustic guitars, and all the comments we have when we started launching some of the content on this stuff, honestly, made me kind of think, whoa, okay, we need to back up here and probably need to explain a bit more before people get kind of upset about the idea of it. But it was that. It was like, can we take an electric guitar? And I was thinking two things. Firstly, live, wouldn't it be great to have something that sounds nice and acoustic-like, that you could just flip to a neck pickup on a live rig and have that come out of your system, particularly for people who are using full range, going straight to PA, where they don't have to worry about the guitar speed coloring the sound. So that was one avenue, and then the other was like, as a quick tool for just putting down parts or writing or ideas. It was a great kind of go-to quick solution that you could get a better sound, ideally, than plugging in a piezo thing. And I know you could probably put an IR on that as well, and maybe make it sound a little bit better. But that was my pure thinking at the beginning of this. If this is viable, then it can sound better than a plugged-in acoustic. And I believe that it does, if you read the manual and do it properly, which is essential, because it's not, and I think people don't understand that some of the things that we do with NAMM, they're not just sort of load it up and go. Some of them are quite complicated in the way they behave and the things that they contain, because you can put those things into NAMM, and that's what makes it special. So, there's compression in this acoustic profile that you control with the input knob. So if you don't do that, then it's not going to sound very nice, because its default is not to have too much on there, so that the user has an ability to add more. So it's like the threshold on a compressor, the input knob. So you need to run it probably at least +6, maybe more if you've got your levels calibrated at -6, to get it back to a position where the compressor's even engaged and it starts sounding nice. So that's important. The other thing is we designed it in such a way that the EQ on NAMM is like the EQ you would have on your acoustic. You're supposed to use it. So it's going to sound pretty flat if the EQ is flat. If you want it brighter, you brighten it, you use the EQ, and it's absolutely been designed around that principle. We've tuned it so that the EQ frequencies on NAMM, which are very good, it's a very good equalizer, and it's very transparent. We've tuned the result so that works very much like the EQ on your acoustic would, your 3-band, bass, middle, treble on an active piezo output on an acoustic. So you have to use that to get it, and you have to use it to sound how you want. So I typically would run it maybe, at least add sort of 6 to the treble, probably take a tiny bit of the mid-range away because an acoustic tends to be less mid-focused than an electric, and probably add a little bit of bass as well. So do a kind of a little scoopy thing, which then will give you, depending on what kind of acoustic stuff you want to do, if you're strumming, then that will work well. If you want to do more lead-focused things, then maybe you wouldn't take the mid out. But you have to use it like that. You can't just expect it to do all of the work for you. It is designed to be a system, not a profile. It's a kind of like a device. And when you understand the parameters of how the device works, well, then you unlock the ability to make it sound how you want. When you start adding some of the top end back in is when it starts sounding really kind of quite convincing under the fingers. The strings, when they slap on the board, they start sounding very much more acoustic-like. And again, I mean, you can say, well, it doesn't sound exactly like an acoustic, therefore I'm not interested, and that's fine, but that wasn't the goal. It was, does it sound nice? Is it musically useful? Do I prefer it to plugging a sort of standard piezo acoustic in? And the answer to all those things was yes for me, so we released it. And that was all I was interested in doing, getting to the point where I was happy that it met those criteria, so it's a valid thing to exist. Let's put it out there and see what people think of it. So we did 2. I did my own personal Martin, I've had for years and years, which I love. It's not an expensive one. It's one of the DX models with the kind of interesting composite construction, but I love the sound of it. It's completely like, no electronics whatsoever. It's not even painted. It's not even varnished. It's raw wood, and I love the sound of guitars that are unfinished, particularly acoustic instruments. So I did that one first, and that was cool. And then we got in a J45 because it's kind of like, a studio classic Gibson J45, and did the whole process again with that. And they are very different sounding, and so those are the 2 that are currently on the store. I was going to do more, but to be honest, for the moment, I'd rather concentrate on the other products and come back to it when we've had some engagement and maybe some feedback from people. That was my, initial idea. But the feedback initially was as I say, visceral. Like,
yeah.
Why are you doing this? Like, what is this? This can't exist. This is not allowed to. I don't want to see this. And that was really interesting to me because it was. Maybe they're acoustic players who the idea of that is abhorrent, and I can understand that because it's no replacement for holding an acoustic instrument, and there's never going to be a way to do that. That was understood from me at the beginning. But I do believe it's useful musically, and I think that it sounds really nice, and I certainly enjoyed playing it. For me, I can spend hours playing on it, and it sounds nice to me. And so I thought, well, people can make music with things that sound nice, Therefore, it's valid, so we put it out. And that's really the story so far.
2 points and then a question. Number 1, I wish I talked to you before I did my video about the Quantum Acoustics. I had no idea about the input compressor and how the EQ relates to everything. So I did notice that I liked the tone on the neck pickup over the bridge, and that makes sense because...
You have to be sure to use the correct IR as well.
Right.
And try it with a humbucker.
Yeah.
If you've got any humbucker that's close to the ones that are in the list, start there, and even if it's not close, use a normal humbucker and use one of the humbucker profiles to see the one that you like the sound of the most as a starting point. So that's the key. Get it to sound as nice as you can to start, and then use the EQ from there.
Point number 2, piezo pickups are horrible. I'm glad they exist. I'm glad they do what they do, but I've never had a good experience with them. The best personal experience I've had is running a pickup like that through an acoustic IR. I don't even know what an acoustic IR was at that point, and then running that to the PA. And I worked as a live sound tech for years. I think the best acoustic sound I heard was Jason Mraz. He ran his acoustic through speaker cabs built into road cases that were closed off, so they sat somewhere else, but they were mic'd up. So I don't know what kind of magic he did, but it was never the piezo going straight to the board or through like a Fishman preamp or anything like that. It's always taking the piezo and doing something with it, because just inherently the piezo pickup just never sounds right because it's not miking up an acoustic guitar. And I got to remember my question now. What was my question? Oh, can you talk about the process of making an acoustic profile? Because I understand the concept of how to capture like an amp profile. You send a signal through the amp and you capture it, and then you compare the original signal to the profiled signal, and that's your different. And the same thing for like anything else you throw through it. But you can't necessarily run a signal through an acoustic guitar. So can you just talk about how you made them?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
If you have the device that we made to do it with, you can actually run signals of a type. I mean, I can't explain all of it. Obviously, it's a proprietary device. I don't want to go too far into revealing everything, but I'll explain basically how it works. Yeah. So it creates inductance in a device that moves, which makes the soundboard vibrate, and then there's another component to it which captures that as audio. But it does it so how to make the profile is not the same as how you do that. That's how you capture the resonance, but that's only one element. So the way that we make the profiles is by deconstructing the acoustic instrument into its elements. The strings are an element too. So we have to separately capture those sound behaviors and physical behaviors and then recombine them. And this all comes back down to what makes NAMM completely different. The fact that you have access to that WAV file that you're going to then train before you train it means that you can create things that you can't do in real time. So it means that you can create a file to train that was not created all at once. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then you can train it. So we basically deconstruct the instrument into its elements, then we recombine those elements into a file that we can train, and then we train the file. And that's how it's done in a nutshell.
Jesus Christ, that's super interesting. I think you are very underappreciated for how much like work you actually put into things.
Maybe so, but we're still really new as well. I mean, as a company, we've only been at it for a few months, right? So we started late last year in the summer, but we didn't have anything. We started with an idea. And the idea was that we're going to approach things, like every product we've released so far has never been done before. And that may not be obvious to people when they see them because it might look like, oh, here's an amp profile pack. It's like, yeah, but we went in and recreated the actual session for that album. And we profiled in place the actual signal chain that was used by that guitar player in 1988. That's not, let me just put this on my amp and click go. That's not what other people are doing, right? So, but again, to them, it's just a sound at the end of the day, and maybe it's not obvious. So there's an awful lot of, why would you do that about what we're doing? But that's the whole point. I believe it's time for profiling technology now to take the next step, which is to become like a custodian, an archive, like a preservation, because it's so good. It's actually capable now of creating digital representations that are 0.000 something accurate to the real thing. For me, that was when the light bulb went off and when this entire story started. It was like, well, if you can do that, we can start to now preserve the knowledge that I hold. I mean, my generation of engineers will never come again. We worked in a music industry that doesn't exist anymore. I spent my life every day in big professional recording studios for decades. That I don't do that now because, firstly, there aren't any of them anymore, and the ones that there are exclusive and expensive enough that I'm not in them all the time. So, having lived that life and the knowledge that I gained from it and the people that I learned from, I felt almost, this is going to sound ridiculous, it's going to sound very egotistical, I don't mean it to be. I felt almost like a custodian of knowledge and skills that I can actually create these products, these sounds that contain that knowledge in a way that preserves almost like an archive, like for the Van Halen thing we did, for time immemorial, people have been talking about how do you get that sound. And, I've allowed people to still have those discussions. I don't want to destroy it. I think it's romantic, and I think that it's beautiful that people can talk 40 years later about how, what pickup did he use and how did he tune his guitar and all this. I think, I love that. That's me. I'm one of those people, right? But at the same time, I have the skills and knowledge and experience to actually work out and understand the real detail, recreate that, and then there's no purpose for doing that, recreating it all other than my own curiosity, until profiling technology comes along and says, and I can bottle that, and I can give it to someone else, and they can have that sound. Now, for me, it's like a shift from, it was always about gear. Now we can say, well, how about, let's just talk about the sound. You interact with the sound as its own identity, as its own valued thing, where it's not I don't want to spend £2,000 on this amplifier, so I'm going to buy this profile pack, and now I own it, and I'm going to collect them all because I want them all. That's one thing, and that's not what we do at all. There may be some of that, but when I do it, it won't be like that. I'm working on some stuff around that area now in terms of sounds of amps, but not amps you can buy. Not amps even that necessarily exist in real life. But the concept and the principle of doing things like that, for me, it's twofold. When I started, I wanted to do what everybody had asked for. I know this sounds silly, but actually if you spend time reading what people say in forums, they're sick of buying sounds for devices that don't sound like what they say they are. They don't want to spend money on software that has invasive copy protection and is overpriced. I can list all these things. You already know what they are. We all know what they are. So we said, okay, right, we're going to do everything that everyone's asking for. And with that ability to actually get the sounds perfectly, matched at the source, we're going to preserve as well. And maybe at some point people are going to catch up and be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that's what this was, maybe. Hopefully, we hope so. But either way, there's a sort of validity for me in doing it anyway, because we know that these things will exist forever in the digital realm. And, you've heard the Metallica one. That was a dream for me as a child. Look, I'm wearing a Metallica t-shirt today. It's a coincidence. But, when I started learning guitar, it was so that I could learn how to play Injustice for All. It was not because I wanted to learn how to play guitar. It's because I wanted to learn that album. And I could not do it. That was like my spark, my inspiration. So to going back to me now as a child of 15 years old in the 80s, learning to play guitar, if somebody would be able to walk up to me and say, hey, dude, you like the sound of that guitar on that record? There you go, like $10 that you can have that, and all the other sounds too. What do you think? And I was, as a kid, I could just be like, what? Sure, it was a long time ago, but I think, that's the promise of digital technology. As I understand it, that's the future promise, that you'll be able to get your phone out and have the exact sound that was on a record made in 1974 immediately, and it's perfect. Now, when I say we, most people aren't there yet. We, as a company, are 100% there, and we're doing everything we can to bring everyone else along for the ride. But that's exactly where we are. We want to be able to give people sounds that get them as excited as the gear did. Not even the romance of the gear. Not like, oh man, I need to own a JCM 800. Everyone I love uses one. I love the sound of all their records. And then you bring one home and realize, unless you want to actually die from the sound pressure level, it ain't going to sound anything like any of the things that you've heard on those records. And even then, without the engineer there to record it, without the producer and his taste there to make decisions with the artist, the sound that you obtain by even owning the same gear as that original artist, all of it, is nothing like their sound on the record. And it never will be, because you need all those other things as well. And you've already done a video on that, which really was very helpful, I think, to break the idea for people to understand how much more there is to it. So we want to be able to say, okay, like, we know how to do those things, so why don't we do them? And you've said, all of you have said, these are what you want from the kind of guitar product industry. Let's see if Neutron can do the things that people are asking, and see if they really meant it.
Well, there you go. I hope we all learned something. If you want to learn more about the Quantum Acoustic Packs or anything else Neutron Studios is doing, I'll have links in the description. And if you have any questions or feedback for me and Stu, go ahead and drop a comment and we'll try to get back to you. And if you want to learn more about any of the gear I use, go ahead and check the description. I'll have links for everything. And I think that's all I got for you for now. So, thank you for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.